Here's David. He just leased a Porsche, designer wardrobe, 8 grand a month for a view he's never home to see. Here's James, the guy next door. Same Toyota since his kids were in grade school. Same house for 20 years. Nothing about James whispers money. One of them is a millionaire. The other is quietly drowning in a way that won't show up for years. Guess which is which? Go ahead. Most people get this wrong. Not because they're not smart, because somewhere along the way, we were all taught to read wealth backwards. The people who look rich, they're usually the ones who aren't. So before I show you who's actually worth what, you're going to have to throw out almost everything you think rich looks like, because it starts with a belief you didn't even know you were carrying. Here's the uncomfortable part. Almost everything you've been taught about what wealth looks like is wrong. And once you see what the data actually says, you won't be able to look at money the same way again. Think about it for a second. You've probably done this without even realizing it. You see a nice car in a parking lot, and some quiet part of your brain files, that person under doing well. You walk through a beautiful neighborhood and assume the people behind those doors have it figured out. Someone posts a new watch, a luxury bag, a weekend in Santorini, and for just a split second you think, they must be rich. Almost everyone believes it. Not because it's true, but because we've spent our entire lives surrounded by the same signals. Expensive car equals success. Big house equals wealth. High income equals financial freedom. You didn't consciously decide to believe that formula. It seeped in slowly from advertisements, movies, social media, and decades of watching expensive things get mistaken for wealth. So, what if almost all of it is backwards? Let's start with cars, because this one surprises almost everyone. If you asked a room full of people what the average millionaire drives, you'd probably hear Mercedes, BMW, maybe Tesla. What you almost never hear is the actual answer: Ford, Toyota, Honda. Year after year, the data points to the same ordinary brands. Not exotic, not flashy, not even particularly interesting. And when millionaires do spend more, they're usually buying something like a Lexus. Reliable, comfortable, often paid off. Now, picture David again, leasing that Porsche. Hundreds of dollars every month. Before insurance, before fuel, before the lease expires and the payments start all over again. David isn't buying transportation. He's renting status. Meanwhile, the people whose wealth he's trying to imitate are quietly driving home in a paid-off Camry. So if the car isn't the giveaway, maybe it's the house. Surely that's where the real money hides. Except not really. The majority of American millionaires never paid more than about $400,000 for their home. And here's the surprising part. Many stay in that same house for 20 years or longer. Not because they can't afford something bigger, because moving somewhere flashier was never the goal. They're not living in Beverly Hills. They're living in neighborhoods you'd probably drive through without giving a second thought. The houses don't announce anything. Neither do the people inside them. So if the house isn't the clue either, maybe it's the career. Surely that's where wealth becomes obvious. This is the part that catches almost everyone off guard. The most common professions among millionaires aren't celebrities, not athletes, not influencers, not startup founders with millions of followers. They're engineers, accountants, managers, attorneys, and teachers. Just let that sit for a second. Not a teacher who became famous, not a teacher who built a business on the side, just a teacher. Someone who spent decades grading papers, driving the same routes, and quietly building more wealth than many people who looked far more successful on paper. So if flashy spending isn't the answer, and income alone isn't the answer, then what is? Instead of another statistic, let me introduce you to someone whose life explains the entire pattern better than any chart ever could. His name was Ronald Read. For most of his life, Ronald pumped gas. Later, he swept floors as a janitor at JCPenney. He drove an old pickup truck. When buttons fell off his clothes, he fixed them with safety pins instead of buying new ones. If you passed Ronald on the street, you wouldn't have looked twice. Nothing about him looked wealthy. Nothing about him was supposed to. Then Ronald Read died in 2014. His family, his neighbors, his entire town, they were stunned because the quiet janitor everyone overlooked had quietly accumulated around $8 million. Not through lottery tickets, not through secret investments, not through some hidden inheritance, just thousands of ordinary decisions, repeated over decades. No one noticed, because real wealth rarely announces itself while it's being built. It looks ordinary, almost invisible, right up until the numbers tell a completely different story, which raises a fascinating question. How does a janitor quietly become wealthier than many doctors? What was Ronald doing every single day that David, driving the Porsche, wasn't? The answer isn't a stock tip. It isn't a secret investment. And it definitely isn't about earning more. It's something much deeper, something rooted in psychology. And once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere, including in your own decisions. That's exactly where we're headed next. So let's answer that. What was Ronald actually doing differently? Not investing wizardry, not some secret system. He simply didn't fall for the thing almost all of us fall for. Let's talk about that thing. There's a phenomenon psychologists call hedonic adaptation. Here's what it means. You buy the car. You feel amazing for about 2 weeks. Then something strange happens. The excitement fades. The new car just becomes the car. Researchers have tracked this in the most extreme cases imaginable. Lottery winners. People who suddenly had more money than they'd ever dreamed of. You'd expect them to be blissfully happy for the rest of their lives. They weren't. Within about a year, their happiness returned almost exactly to where it started. Same as before the money. Which means the high from buying something new isn't really about the thing. It's a spike, not a foundation. And once you know that, something else starts to make sense. Why David, leasing that Porsche, never seems satisfied. Because he's not chasing happiness. He's chasing the next spike. And spikes always fade. Which leads to something even stranger. Because it's not just that the excitement fades, it's that the thing you bought starts changing what you see. There's a name for this too. The Diderot Effect. Picture this. Someone named Anna buys one nice thing. A new couch, let's say. Suddenly, the coffee table next to it looks cheap. So Anna replaces the coffee table. Now the rug looks worn. So she replaces the rug. Then the walls look dull. One purchase didn't satisfy anything. It opened a door. And once that door is open, it doesn't close on its own. This is why the upgrade never stops. New car, new watch, new wardrobe. Each one quietly making everything around it look insufficient. It's not weakness. It's wiring. Anna's brain isn't broken for feeling this. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do. Which brings us to the one trait that seems to separate almost everyone who builds real wealth from almost everyone who doesn't. You've probably heard of the marshmallow experiment. Researchers sat children down in front of a marshmallow. One simple offer. Eat it now or wait 50 minutes and get 2. Some children waited, some couldn't. But here's the part that made the study famous. The researchers followed those same kids for years, decades in some cases, and the ones who could wait, they tended to end up healthier, more stable, more successful by almost every measure researchers tracked. Not because delayed gratification is some magic skill, because it's the single hardest thing to do in a culture built entirely to stop you from doing it. Every ad, every app, every buy now, pay later button is engineered to make you a kid staring at a marshmallow. Except now, the marshmallow has a financing plan. So here's the real question. If 2 people make the exact same income, what actually decides which one ends up like Ronald and which one ends up like David in the Porsche? Let me show you 2 people who make this painfully clear. One of them is a surgeon named David. The other, James, fixes pipes for a living. And by the time they're both 55, only one of them is actually free. It's probably not who you think. Let's meet them. David, the surgeon, makes $500,000 a year. Say that number out loud and it sounds like the finish line. Like the whole game is over and he won. He drives a car that turns heads in the hospital parking lot. His kids go to the private school 2 towns over. His house has the kind of kitchen people photograph for magazines. And every year, David saves about 10% of what he makes, which sounds responsible, until you understand what's quietly eating the other 90. Because when you make that much money, something strange happens. The lifestyle doesn't just grow to match the income. It grows to match the expectation. Other doctors have the lake house, so David needs one too. Other doctors send their kids private, so does he. Other doctors drive something German, so does he. He's not living beyond his means, he's living exactly at the edge of them, every single month, on purpose. Now, meet James, the plumber. He makes about $120,000 a year. Less than a quarter of what David brings home. James's truck is paid off. Has been for years. He's lived in the same house for 25 years, the one he bought back when it felt like a stretch. And every year, without telling anyone, without posting about it, without needing anyone to notice, James saves 30% of what he makes. Not because he's a financial genius, because nobody around him is spending in a way that makes him feel behind. So, here's the question that should make you a little uncomfortable. By the time they're both 55, who actually has more? It's James. Not close either. David is earning 4 times as much and ending up with less because income was never the variable that mattered. Behavior was. And David's income didn't buy him freedom. It bought him a more expensive treadmill, which brings us to something almost nobody thinks about when they're standing in a dealership signing for a car. The price on the sticker isn't the real price. Say you're 30 and you buy a $100,000 car instead of investing that same money. That's not just $100,000 gone. That's $100,000 that will never get the chance to grow, never compound, never quietly turn into something bigger while you sleep. Left alone until retirement, that same money could have become well over $1 million. You didn't just buy a car. You bought the absence of a future $1 million and had it delivered with leather seats. Here's a smaller number that makes the point even harder to ignore. $500 a month, invested from 25 to 65, at a reasonable average return. That's not a fortune. That's a car payment, a few dinners out, the kind of money that disappears from most people's accounts without them noticing. Left alone for 40 years, it becomes something close to $1.75 million. Nobody feels that number while they're spending it in $20 increments. That's exactly why it works on almost everyone. There's a way to think about this that makes it click. Most people only ever play offense with money, earn more, get the promotion, land the raise. Nobody teaches you to play defense because defense doesn't look impressive. Nobody posts a screenshot of the purchase they didn't make. But defense is where James won. And it's where David quietly lost, one lifestyle upgrade at a time. So if all of this is true, if status spending is secretly this expensive, if behavior beats income, if the invisible people are the ones actually winning, does that mean you're supposed to never enjoy your money? Never buy anything nice, ever, for the rest of your life? That's the part almost everyone gets wrong next. So let's deal with the objection you're probably already forming. What's the point of having money if you're not going to enjoy it? Fair question. Nobody's arguing for a life of denial. Nobody's saying live like Ronald Read, patching your shirt with safety pins forever. The goal was never deprivation. Here's what actually separates the people who build wealth from the people who just look like they have it. They spend extravagantly on the things that genuinely move the needle for them. And they cut without guilt everything else. Not cut everything. Cut the stuff that was never really about you in the first place. James isn't miserable in that paid off truck. He just never wanted the lake house to begin with. The spending he does on his kids, on the things he actually cares about, he does without flinching. Because he's not funding 2 lives at once. The one he's living and the one he's performing for people who were never really watching that closely anyway. That's the difference. Not never spend on purpose. Here's the second objection, and it's the one that sounds the most reasonable. Life is short. Why wait? Also true. Nobody's promised tomorrow, But flip that logic around for a second, because it cuts the other way too. If life really is short, why spend decades of it quietly stressed about money you don't have, financing a version of yourself designed to impress people who forget what you were wearing 5 minutes after they saw it? David isn't living large because life is short. He's on a treadmill because he never let himself get off. That's not enjoying life while it lasts. That's a decades-long financial hangover with a nice paint job. And here's the third one, the one people bring up like it's a gotcha. But some rich people do buy the cars, the watches, the houses. Also true, nobody's denying it. Here's what almost never gets mentioned in the same sentence though. They usually bought wealth first. The luxury came after, not instead of it. That order matters more than almost anything else in this entire video. Buy the freedom first. The stuff, if you still want it, comes free and clear later, paid in cash by a person who no longer needs it to mean anything. Buy the stuff first, hoping the freedom follows. That's a bet almost everyone loses. So if it's not about deprivation, and it's not about waiting forever, and it's not about pretending nice things are evil, then what exactly are you supposed to be working toward? Because here's the strange part almost nobody expects. The actual prize was never a bigger house, never a nicer car. It's something most people never even picture when they imagine being rich. So, what is the prize then? Go back to the beginning for a second. David and the Porsche. The $8,000 a month apartment. James, the guy next door in the same Toyota he's had since his kids were in grade school. You were asked to guess which one was actually wealthy. By now, you already know. But here's what's strange. Knowing the answer doesn't feel like winning a trivia question. It feels like something shifted underneath you. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every parking lot becomes a puzzle. Every must be doing well thought gets a little quieter. That's not a coincidence. That's the whole point. Because David, in that leased Porsche, isn't the villain of the story. He's not even the mistake. He's just following instructions nobody ever told him were optional. Spend to signal, upgrade to belong, look successful, and eventually you'll feel successful. Except it doesn't work that way. It never did. James isn't hiding anything either. He's not secretly miserable, gritting his teeth through a boring life so a spreadsheet can look good in 30 years. He's just not playing. He opted out of a game most people don't even realize they're in. And that's the actual prize, not the number, the exit. Picture it for a second. Not the house, not the car, not some finish line with a bow on it. Picture someone falling asleep on a Tuesday night without doing math in their head. Picture someone walking out of a job that was slowly wearing them down, because the money was never the thing keeping them there. The fear was, and the fear is gone now. Picture someone standing in a room full of new watches and new kitchens and new everything, feeling nothing. Not superiority, not judgment, just quiet. That's what Ronald Read had, sweeping floors in a coat that had seen better decades. That's what James has in the same house he bought when it felt like a stretch. You never see that on magazine covers. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't look like anything, which is exactly the point you started this video not understanding. Real wealth was never trying to be seen. The moment it starts performing for an audience, it stops being wealth and starts being a costume, expensive, uncomfortable, and rented by the month. So if you're waiting for the part where this tells you to buy index funds or track every purchase in an app, that's not what this was actually about. Those are just mechanics. Anyone can look those up in 5 minutes. What can't be looked up is the decision underneath all of it. The one nobody teaches because it doesn't photograph well and it doesn't sell anything. The decision to stop financing a performance for people who were never really watching. The decision to let the coffee table stay a little worn. The decision to be the person in the parking lot nobody looks twice at on purpose. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's a version of you eyeing a purchase that has nothing to do with needing it and everything to do with what it might say about you. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to prove anything to the room. You just have to become the kind of person the room could never actually see coming. I don't have to look wealthy. I just have to become it.